Hi there guys, welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be looking at adding an event listener to our form or to a HTML form. We're going to be using a basic a basic form which is going to have an input box. It's going to have a place to put a password in. We're not actually going to be using that password field particularly, it's more for decoration to be really honest in this example. We're going to then be using the JavaScript. We're not going to be using massive amounts of JavaScript to make this actually. It's quite a straightforward bit of code. But what it will do is that the idea behind an event listener is that it's listening for a particular event to happen, which in this case will be the user typing into the text box and trying to work out how many characters the end user has written. And if it is above a certain level, then the event listener will simply do nothing because it's over a certain level. Whereas if it's going to be under a certain level, which will be 5, then the end user will get a message displayed on their screen saying that the actual text box should contain a certain number of characters. So the first thing we'll do is set up our HTML. So I'm using Sublime Text again. The reason why I'm using Sublime Text at the minute is because I am demonstrating that actually you do not need things like Dreamweaver to be able to write HTML. I'm going to pretty much save it off the bat, and I'm going to just put it into a new folder on in my area, and I'm going to call this one event listener, and I'm going to save it as a HTML file, and I'm going to manually add the .html at the end so that hopefully it will work the first time. So if I go into my folder here, yep, I can see because it is a HTML file that it has saved correctly. Okay, so let's get to writing our HTML code. So as with any page, we've started with a doc type to let the browser know what version of HTML we're using. Head tags in there, title, event listener. You can call this whatever you want, doesn't really matter. Obviously, if you want to have some CSS in there, you can add that to make it look nicer. I'm predominantly concentrating on the process of making the event listener itself in this tutorial. So I'm going to have just a header 1, event listener in JavaScript. Now, when you come, and I'll probably repeat this later on, but when you come to make this, I'm only going to show you a little bit of a form. Obviously, you can expand your form in any number of different ways, and you can apply this to multiple different parts of your form potentially, although more text-driven ones, to be honest with you. Okay, so I've just put a couple of bits at the top, they're more for decoration really than anything else. And also, if you guys want to put something a bit more descriptive about what has actually happened in this page, then obviously you can first of all use commenting within the code, but also you can put it within the title so that, or within these two things here, because ultimately it just may be something for you to refer to later on. Okay, so I'm actually going to make a separate page called signup.html. I'll probably do that right at the end, to be honest. So I'm basically going to have 3 things in my form. I'm going to have a username, a password, and a submit button. So when we use the label here, this can be done instead of using just the paragraph tag. But either will work, to be honest. So if you have done the forms tutorial, you should be hopefully at least semi-familiar with these type of things that I'm putting in. So we've got input type of text. We're given an idea of username. So within the actual JavaScript, we can actually point to that and actually say, look at this field and count how many characters are in this field, okay? Which is the plan later on. Now I'm going to add a div here, and there's going to be nothing in the div. And the reason why there's nothing in the div is because this is where, if we need something to be displayed, so if somebody has put in an insufficient number of characters, this is the section that will display the message to the end user and say, actually, you need a proper number of characters within it. Okay, so it's very similar to the above. So the username, the input types for text and password are very similar. If you aren't familiar with things like passwords, then they basically display as a series of asterisks on your screen, or whatever you set it to be. It's a very, very basic method of security. Do not rely on it preventing people from hacking it. Now, I've put a load of carriage returns in there. That is to make the code go further at my screen. It's not going to have any material impact on the way the web page behaves. You don't need to put those carriage returns in there. Okay. I'm going to put my final part of the form, which will be my submit button. Value of submit. And now I'm going to add my JavaScript source. Okay. So I'm looking, or this page is looking for a JavaScript page called listener.js. It doesn't exist at the minute, we're not made yet. If I was to open the page up, it just looks like this and will do nothing. It will, if I click submit, it will look for the other page that we've made. We've not made it yet, so again, it will come up as not found. So that's pretty much all of the HTML that we need, at least in this file. I'm going to now create a new file, and I'm going to save it as listener.js, which if you remember is what we've literally just specified in HTML. And I'm going to make just the one function. Okay, it's coming up white, so sometimes, oh no, it should be okay. Oh, there we go. Sometimes if it does come up white, in the actual code itself, if you go in here, sometimes it won't. Sublime Text can be a little bit funny, and you might need to go in there and just rename it by right-clicking and going into rename. I don't need to do that. I'm going to make a function. It's going to be called check username. Now, obviously, if I'm going quickly, you are welcome to pause at any given point. So you may be wondering why the document.element IP by ID equals feedback. So what we're going to do is basically create an event listener and apply it to username, and then we're going to run a test on username, and this if message will be displayed in feedback, which is why I'm applying var check message to feedback, because ultimately this will be applied to that part of the web page rather than the username. And remember to semicolon at the end. We're going to have an if statement. This check message or MSG dot text content I've got a horrible feeling that I've done something wrong here. Okay, so these are two separate characters here. They're not a speech mark. Okay, let's go back and change that to capital T. They are not separate, those two. And then we have the two items down here. Somehow I've managed to acquire an extra bracket here. I'll get rid of that. Now these two lines that I'm going to add here are going to be the ones that reference the username field. This is the listener, don't forget. So the listener is the one that's going to basically plug into the HTML. It's going to work out the number of characters that the end user has put into the text box. And you see there, that is the point where we are calling the function. Okay, so it shouldn't be blue, it should be blur. It should be check blur, check username, and then false. So what we're looking for here is the result of this function. You know, what's going to come back out of this function. So what we're looking at here is we're setting this at the beginning to be false. Okay, so we're setting it at the beginning to show this. Okay, we're not setting it to be true, which would display that. Okay, so if I save it, like I said, there's not massive amounts of code here. But if I save it and then I go back, I've saved it by doing Control S, and I go back into the JavaScript page, and this is where the proof of the pudding. If I put a 1 in here, it every time. Okay, sorry, that's going to look a bit weird on your video, but basically, I've made an error with the caps lock, so my var wasn't spelled the same name. So obviously your JavaScript is going to be case sensitive. So basically my L username needs to be exactly the same, including capital letters. So if you save that, and then you do create your username, then it should come up with that feedback. Now, what I would like to stress is actually this won't stop the end user potentially clicking submit and getting the result out of this. So I just want to quickly knock up a page, and I might be a bit lazy, just do Control A and just put a little title in there. Okay, and then file save as. I can't remember what I called it. What did I call it? Sign up to HTML. So that's what is here. So when I click on the submit button, it will take me to that page. Now, in theory, you could have some processing going on here to actually work out what's going on. You could have data being sent from your form into potentially a database, although generally you'd need to work with something like PHP to make that happen. So I've just hit refresh again, and then when I click submit, you can see it now takes me to a page. In theory, you could use the buttons here as hyperlinks to make a whole website, but generally, because there's a very limited amount you can do to actually style this stuff, and you can't do things like drop-down lists on them. It's probably better off just to make a straightforward hyperlink. But yeah, that's a very simple way to add a little bit of verification onto your form. Obviously, like I said, it's not totally fallible, but at the same time, you would give an end user just a little bit of feedback about whether or not their username would be long enough. Like I said, you can apply it to other things, like you could, in theory, apply it to the password as well if you wanted to. But that's just an example of how to add an event listener to a form. Thank you for watching. I hope that has been useful to you. And I will look forward to seeing you soon. Again, if you hit subscribe, then you'll be able to get and follow and so on and so on. You'll be able to get notifications of when I put new stuff on here, which again, hopefully will be helpful to you when you are making content for the web. Again, thank you very much for your time. Bye.